I'm Terri Francis. I'm a professor at UM in the Cinematic Arts Department. And thank you, Marie, for reading that introduction earlier. And I'm really happy to be here. Excited for this conversation with the two of you. Now it's my turn to do some introductions. I have red glasses, just like the villainess of the of the movie. To my left is, which I think some of you know, is Louis Gispert, who's an internationally recognized American visual artist living and working in New York and Miami. His multidisciplinary practice extends from sculpture to photography, painting, and film. His work has been showcased and is in the permanent collections of over 25 influential institutions that include the Whitney Museum of American Art, the Royal Academy in London, here at the Perez Art Museum, the Solomon Guggenheim Museum in New York, Shanghai Museum of Contemporary Art, and the MCA Chicago, which used to be my hometown museum. Awesome. Born in New Jersey to Cuban immigrant parents, he was raised between New York and Miami. Coming of age in Miami's visually rich cross-section of cultures inspired him to become a visual artist. He attended Miami-Dade College, studied film at the Art Institute of Chicago, and earned an MFA in sculpture from Yale University. As we've seen tonight, his artwork deals with themes of race, class, and cultural identity, and the immigrant experience of loss and hope. Welcome.
Thank
Louis.
you. Thank you.
Next to him is Ryan Murphy, who studied photography at the Massachusetts College of Art under Nicholas Nixon and Abe Morrell. During this time, he became a regular contributor to Grand Royal magazine and curated Barry McGee's Twist's first solo gallery show. Later on, he collaborated with Stephen Powers Espo and Todd James Reyes as part of the Art in the Streets exhibition at Geffen at MoCA, Los Angeles. He served as the press kit photographer in promotion of the Beastie Boys award-winning album, takes us back, Hello Nasty. Next, he moved into filmmaking, working at Avid Technology, and this led to an editing career with filmmakers such as Errol Morris, Michael Moore, Jason Reitman, Ben Stiller, Roger Walters, Tom McCarthy, and Eaton Cohen. He's worked on the films Syriana, Young Adult, Adventureland, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, and Stillwater, among many others, including, of course, the film that we've just seen tonight. He currently lives in Cold Spring, New York, with his wife and two rascally children, he tells us.
Thank you very much.
Welcome. Well, we have lots to talk about with this really interesting movie, Cajita. It has a kind of an interesting origin story, and I wonder if you could tell us, Louis, how the film came to be.
So the film is inspired by a true story of someone I knew growing up in Miami, which was a very close friend of my father. And he had left Cuba under a very strange situation and basically had to sneak himself out in a box. And there were other stories after that of a couple of people who actually did ship themselves in crates to Miami. And of course, then growing up with that story and then later learning about the Henry Box Brown story, and there was definitely something there. So that's the origin story of how that story came to me.
Yeah, the Henry Box story is an amazing story to me because it's, so Henry Box Brown, I don't know if people know that story, was a slave in Virginia. He mailed himself to abolitionists in Philadelphia. He mailed himself to freedom. I think it took about almost a month.
Yeah, back then, yeah.
Yeah, 27 days. And then while his his wife and children remained in slavery, he became a touring speaker
Right.
in England, and then a magician.
Yes, that's right.
as one
Illusionist,
does.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, this is the strange afterlife. Of
But
his
that
freedom.
act was very important to the abolitionist movement.
That's
it
right.
brought a lot of attention, which was, yeah.
Yeah, and actually, I think I read too, like Frederick Douglass actually regretted the publicity because he revealed the ways that he escaped,
Right.
so then other people
Right.
couldn't do it.
Right.
But you're right; it was he became a very popular speaker, and it was an important influence on the movement. Cajita's friend, Tomas's friend, confronts him about staying in the box.
Right.
With William Box Brown, he freed himself. He lived, and he died in as a liberated person.
Right.
What's your feeling about our box, Cajita?
Well, I think that to sum up the movie is about trauma and the trauma and the difficulty of just living in the world. And so our main character, he's dealing with, he's a person who can't integrate or deal with his past trauma and his current trauma. So he came from a place, he created a very traumatic history, and now his new situation has gotten, and so he can't, so what he does, he creates this safe world to try to protect himself, but the world catches up with him, and he's just trying to deal and figure out how to survive.
Mm-hmm. Ryan, did you want to add to that?
I think Cajita's trauma chases him, much like it chases folks who choose not to deal with it. Mm-hmm. And it's very right behind you, about to get you all the time. And then sometimes it breaks.
Yeah.
And I think with him, and we see him do all these incredibly elegant things, all these kind things. He plays this amazing piano piece. He's the nicest guy.
Very talented person.
Very talented. And then he snaps. And I think, Lewis spent a lot of time, what was Paul Schrader's favorite type of cinema? Oh. Transcendental film.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So the sort of bore the audience to a point
where
then
slow
you
cinema,
do something
right.
so dramatic,
Right.
they're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
And when he finally catches up with Manolo, you see a side of him that's tied to the rage, tied to the trauma, and he can't keep it in anymore.
Right.
Because if you don't deal with trauma, it'll show up when you don't want it to show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we have some insight, I think, or maybe not insight, but we have some views of his inner life with the dream sequences. Right. I'd love to hear about that, how you structured those, how those came to be.
I mean, that's an editorial thing, which, you had a big part
we
in
were
control.
very lucky to meet someone who decided they wanted to work with us, and Nellie Galan.
She's here present today.
Who's up
Could
there
say hello.
back. Hey, Nellie.
Hey, Nellie.
And she came and saw our film at the Miami Film Festival, and she was like, I think there's a really great thing. I think you could work on this a little bit more. I think there's more you could bring up with it, which is always the case with any piece of art, I've come to learn.
Right.
And that really evolved in that process, and so we owe Nellie a great thank you for that.
Yeah, no, that was a really brilliant revision because it allows us, I think, to understand his inner world, some of the, as you said, the trauma, some of the complexity that we see him not just as somebody who's going through the motions, with his boss and with the boss's son and all of these tasks, but he's carrying something, and that's really, in a way, the key to his freedom.
Yeah.
Too.
And I think also, who hasn't put their job or their circumstances before themselves? We all, many, who doesn't put their in front of their family, in front of their stuff, and these two are two very competing things, and luckily the correct one wins at the end.
Yeah.
I noticed the sculpture, the joke around the sculpture in the beginning, and the first time I saw it, I don't think I realized that you were yourself a sculpture. Was that kind of an inside joke for you, or what's?
Yeah, it was interesting because it's like, as being being on the other side of being a sculptor and making discrete objects, it was interesting to have a perspective of kind of have fun with it. And this character who's the son, who's his friend too, but treats him a certain way and is very obsessed with these sculptures, which Cajita and his friend thinks are completely absurd.
The beauty of that is when he's like, it's a turd, man. He's right. Yeah. He's 100% right. I forget where I picked this up, but the thing about like, if you have to explain art, it's not working. And you should be able to bring a plumber and an electrician, a bus driver, and a president of a CEO, and none of them should have to read something that explains the art.
Okay. I'm kind of thinking about that. I just, graded a bunch of exams the last couple of weeks. Like, yeah, I guess, yes.
So it's in the sense that, like,
Yes.
if he sees it immediately and goes, that stinks. But there's all
Yeah.
these other people like, oh, no, it's amazing. And, that's the game we play with, not just art, with many things. And,
Right, yeah.
But he's right. He's got his, he's not. So that was incredibly refreshing.
No, I think that's right. And it's so much a conversation there, too, about value between the two of them. Yeah.
Well, I mean, something that's there that I wanted to talk about was just like social structures, right, and class. And part of what's, like in a way, Cajita left his country because he got caught up with that social structure where, because traditionally everywhere in the world, usually, immigrants or poor people, you sometimes get manipulated and exploited by people who have power. So he leaves his situation back home because of that. Then he comes to Miami. He's got this safe world, but all of a sudden the social structure catches up with him. And he gets put into this precarious situation because the family's kind of exploiting, it's kind of manipulating him. And so the sculpture kind of speaks to, like, again, what's subjective, what's objective, and...
Yeah. You mentioned Miami just now, and I think the first time or two I saw the film, I thought, could this have been filmed somewhere else? Is it specifically a Miami story? What would you say to that, either of you?
I mean, it was born here. It's a Miami story, but I do think it's an American story. Because if you look at any other enclave where there are communities of immigrants, you're going to have similar anxieties and traumas from everywhere around the world, wherever they settle in this country. So yeah, it's a snapshot of a moment. I did want to show a side of Miami that I knew very intimately, that I grew up with. It was all shot in La Havana, where I grew up, and which I had never seen that part of Miami ever depicted in cinema and films. Even on television, it's always another thing that Miami gets consumed by the world. And I wanted to show this one part of it that I haven't seen and tell those stories. So in that way, it is very particular to Miami.
Yeah, and yet it's also, it also speaks to international cinema. It made me think about third cinema and Caribbean cinema, and even the Italian neorealists.
Sure.
Like the way that Tomas or Cajita is kind of chasing after this money, and the conceit of him having to ask different people where his friend is, where's the Bronco, reminded me of The Bicycle Thief.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if you guys know that film, but it's this,
one of my favorite
this
movies.
guy that he needs the bicycle to get the job, and the bicycle is stolen,
Right.
and so
Right.
this takes him all over Rome.
Oh, Rome, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a heartbreaking ending. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very ambivalent ending. And in this film, we have a similar kind of trajectory around the city, and a complex ending
Right.
that I'm honestly not sure how to read. If are we back in the box? Are we dreaming? What's happening?
Well,
Can we?
no, because we worked with the ending a lot.
He's going back. He's going back home, I think.
Yeah.
In all our discussions, and I'm going to have to give Nelly Galan credit again. In all of our discussions of stuff, one of the things that came up in discussion was, when do you stop and go, this isn't working? I need to change course here? When do you, so he's here to do the right thing. His wife is now sick. The right thing hasn't worked out. He finds himself stuck in this situation with this family. It's not going anywhere. Now he's on this thing. All of a sudden, best friend in the world dumps a bag of money after the end of this crazy journey. Clear-cut decision in my point of view of what to do. You know, and so we liked that we weren't explaining it. We weren't trying to explain
Right,
that. We enjoyed that, like, is he in the box? Is he not in the box?
Yeah.
But he does the right thing. He returns what he owes them, and then he keeps his part.
Right. At first, I thought, don't give him all back. That's going to
Exactly.
be that money
Right.
plus the $4,800 for the house.
Yeah.
But of course, Cajita is smarter than that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, but you brought up world cinema too, and I was thinking a lot about Abbas Kiarostami, and a beautiful film. I think it's his first film, like, Where's the Friend's House?
I was just going to
which
say
I love that
yeah.
movie.
Uh-huh.
And it's this boy who his friend loses his homework, and he travels like across several towns to return the homework to his friend, and not going to get in trouble. And it's a beautiful film.
Yeah, and it lets us kind of see the different, as you said, these characters in Little Havana, and also the physical space as we kind of travel around there, and that's very similar to the Kiarostami. I'm curious about one of the characters, the one that gets into the car with Tomas, and I'm not sure what to make of him. He's a comedic character in some ways, but he's also bringing wisdom, and he's sort of like a priest, not a priest, but do you know what I mean? He's
You're referring to the guy who gets a ride, or the
Yeah.
or the
Bon Bon.
or the guy with the
with
tires?
the papaya. And
Okay, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, right.
Well, tell us about the construction of that character.
So his character, and actually he appears about in the middle of the movie. That's about a
Okay,
midpoint
so-
of the film. And again, like I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if he's fully successful how it worked, because his character probably could have been expanded more and get more background of who he is. But he represents a particular character in the Cuban community. That street guy who's always like, trying to, works on, hey. But the thing is, I wanted him to represent the anxiety of the immigrant worker, this constant anxiety of like, you're out there, you're trying to make it happen, and because the movie's like bubbling up at this point, and he kind of represents like this collective anxiety that's of this always trying to survive and trying to figure out what's going on, and he's just super aggressive, and he's, so that's what he represented to me.
Oh, right. So the hustle of the papaya for $4 and
Right. Yeah,
all of that.
yeah. It's like a guy who sells stuff on the street, which is a very common thing in Cuba and here in Miami.
yeah, here
The
in
street
Miami.
vendor.
Yeah, and he also has, I guess, a kind of folk wisdom.
Yeah.
Papaya
Right.
is good for this. The
Right.
star apple is good for that.
Santeria. He brings up the rest of Santeria. You need like you're in trouble. You need to reset. You need a cleansing.
Yeah.
He's like So in a way, he's kind of like digging it, but he has like a certain street wisdom, in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But again, his high energy, and he is a comedic actor, and he brought that to it. But again, but it was to bring up, like, he played it at 11 because it was like, okay, you're like, it's like all the anxiety of the community is with this guy, boom, right there, and it's like, what happened?
Yeah. I thank you for that explanation. The film, you mentioned that he's a comedic actor, and the film does have multiple tones. There are certainly dramatic moments, enigmatic, experimental ones, and then the comedy. I was wondering, Ryan, how did you make sense of that as an editor? How did you find the rhythm for this
I
film?
speak next to no Spanish, and so he was not with me when I did the original cut. But I had worked for somebody before who had had cut a couple movies in languages he didn't speak. So very early on, I learned, like, oh, no way, you can edit a movie and not understand the language, because you got
They were Taiwanese. They were,
there's a couple lines here, a couple lines there. So I put the whole thing together before I talked to him.
Well, it's interesting because,
And then I got, how much did I get right?
well, here was an interesting thing, because we have worked for over the years, and he's cut other films, short films that I've done, and then when I was thinking, okay, who would edit this film, which when I started doing it, I didn't realize, I'm going to make a movie all in pretty much 80% in Spanish. And I said, would it be interesting, and we started talking, if he cuts it visually and sonically, but not knowing what is really being said? I mean, you knew the script, so he cut it first, basically visually and sonically.
Yeah.
And then we started to fine tune the text, which I think made for the rhythm of the film.
Amazing. And as you watch it tonight, are you still editing in your heads?
You
Of
never
course,
stop.
yes,
You
yes.
never
There's like
stop.
3
Yeah.
things I want to change, and it's too late.
God.
It's not going to
we
happen.
didn't get. Yeah, it's like I only shot 2 more scenes. Yeah.
Like, for example,
The never finished painting of film.
yeah, painters never finish painting. That's beautifully said. What are your favorite moments in the production of the film?
I want to answer this. So,
Yeah.
Michel Fregoso, who is an
Are you here?
amazing pianist.
Michel. Okay.
Oh, he went outside. He wrote this. He sits down and he plays this amazing piece that he wrote for our film.
Live. He plays it live on
He's
camera.
playing live.
Recorded it.
And that's
That piece
and
that he composed for the piece.
so for me, like when I put this together, I was like, what is going on here? I couldn't, I was like, he's shooting the piano keys. This guy's playing. This guy's doing it. Like, what is, and I was just like,
Yeah, it's not
that,
lip-synced.
because you get to know him, you get to know the world a little bit, and then he steps in and does a piano recital worthy of Carnegie Hall, and you're
Yeah.
like, what the hell is
Who
going
is this
on with
guy?
this guy?
What did he
Who
get? Yeah.
is this guy?
Yeah. He's the artist. He represents the artist in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and then later on, and then during that we have these flashes of flame and what all these crazy things that are going on in his head. And
Piano
one-
deconstructing. Yeah.
yeah, and one of the things that we had decided upon was he was a great pianist in Cuba, but now he just plays for her, and he's stuck in this role, and he doesn't like it, and he's sitting there and he's doing it, but he's enraged inside.
Yeah.
He's remembering all these. The trauma door is open, and he's just keeping it at the edge.
Fantasizing of destroying the piano, and maybe he did destroy a piano back home. Yeah, it's all just to open up these doors.
The things that used to bring him joy do not anymore,
Right.
and he's like, "What am I doing?"
Yeah, we get a sense of what he left behind,
Right.
potentially, too.
And there's like those glimpses of what could be his wife, could be his granddaughter, could be his, these memories.
Right. And that device of the phone, these conversations on the phone. I remember there's the film Ludi,
Oh, yeah.
by, is that Edson?
Yeah, it's in Gene.
Edson Jean,
Yeah.
yeah. Where the characters are.
Who, by the way, our cinematographer also photographed that film.
Oh, is that right?
Juan, who's here tonight.
Juan,
fantastic.
Juan
Juan,
Barrigas,
Juan.
the very talented Juan.
Oh, that's great. The Miami cinematic community working together. I just thought of that because of the communication through the cassettes,
Right.
and just the way that and with the phone, it's like this device that I think that like all immigrants know that you're really living your life through the phone.
Yep.
Or another time through letters. In the
Right.
case of the Haitian film, living through these cassettes, the time that it takes. So
Yeah.
you're really living in your imagination.
Yeah, that's disembodied voice. Yeah.
Yeah. So like we're seeing Cajita's perspective, but imagine like raising the children of this person who's become just a voice on the phone.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the character who this is really based on had a relationship like that with his family, which was heartbreaking, and he had this, it was this like imagined relationship that
Yeah.
was just only through phone and letters.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a common theme throughout Caribbean cinema, this migrating figure, and early African cinema too.
Yep.
These figures who chase opportunity, and opportunity means going to another place. It means a new language. It means new forms of yourself, or even locking yourself away in some ways to get a job done, get the work done.
Right.
I wonder if you could tell us what's next for each of you. What are you working on now? What's coming up?
I still have a studio practice and continue to do my studio work, and we're still like coming up with different ideas of like what's the next. So we definitely want to do a Miami trilogy. So we would like to do the next 2 stories in Miami.
We're working on something right now that we're psyched about, and that we
It's
really,
too
really
early.
like.
It's like
too early.
tight-lipped.
We're not saying anything about
Yeah.
it.
It's too early.
Yeah, it's very too early, but
half-baked
it's-
yet to...
It
yeah.
starts in Miami and it ends in Miami.
Yeah.
At the moment.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I love the trilogy idea. Why trilogy? You're wanting to explore something.
Well, the show different aspects. Well, this is one aspect of Miami, and it's a particular type of film. It's what as you say, it's an art house movie, but it's a personal film. And then Terri showed her 2 more stories that will show another side of Miami that I think hasn't been seen from a different, perhaps a different genre too, to play with different genres.
At the moment, the idea is to go and occupy the different class structures and the pastiche of that you can get of the semiotics of the city, and the people up in the towers, the guys at the tire change place, and
Yeah.
so we've definitely explored one area
Yeah.
pretty nicely, and so the goal was sort of to go explore other areas and overlap a little bit because
Right,
you are on
overlap,
top of
right.
each other in a city.
Right, that these characters, what if they were to overlap on another world that we find in Miami, but there will be these like moments where maybe people from this world will just tangentially cross paths. Yeah.
Yeah, and then just to close, I like hearing you talk together is just really charming, and I wonder about your process, how you work together, how you negotiate your ideas.
We make fun of each other a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of making
humor.
fun of each other, and that seems to work for us somehow.
Well, we've been working for like what 20 years now.
A little more than 20 years ago.
So we have like a shorthand of, and the editing was interesting because we live about an hour away from each other in New
so
York.
I'm like an hour up the Hudson River in the mountains, in the woods, and he's in Brooklyn. And
So we cut the movie all on, like we were both live online, basically.
I was at my house, he was at his house.
Yeah.
And we didn't see each other for months. And then
Yeah.
it was weird because we met up to go halfway in between Cold Spring and the city. We went to meet up for lunch, and I was like,
Yeah.
you don't see anybody for a long time, and you're like, oh, nice hair. Oh, what else has changed with you? We've been working together for months and hadn't seen each other.
Yeah, but the process is, you come up every day when you meet up, you have a bunch of ideas and you go through them and you're like, okay, that's good, that's terrible, that sucks. And you just, just honestly just be brutal. And then you go through 20 different things, like you do like 20 versions of something. 1 or 2 are going to be maybe good or interesting.
Shorthand, I don't know. There's a lot of comfort. There's a lot of comfortableness in the back and forth that happens.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. And when you work with someone and you like them and you're digging it, like you just want to work with them again, right?
Well, it's like, being really like privileged to be able to work with friends. Like most of the people, we're friends now with everybody, and like working like with Michelle, we became friends. So everybody, like it was a great crew. Everybody was really close. Everybody was on, it was a very small film, and everyone was really like all hands on deck to just try to make this little thing happen. And it was amazing. That Miami is such an amazing place with so much talent on the production side, on the acting side, on the post side, and it was just everybody was there.
Well, that's a really great note to end on. Praise for our community here. Thank you so much for the film
Thank
and
you.
for this conversation. Thank
and
you,
thank you for
everybody.
coming.
Yeah, thanks
thank
for
you so
coming
much.
out.
Yeah.
So good to see you.
Thank you, Maria, and to Pam for the premiere of Cajita. Thank you. Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone.